My mom laughed during my graduation speech and said, "Too bad your real dad isn't here to see this mess." Then she tripped me walking off stage and everyone saw me fall face first. My ex-best friend yelled, "Karma hit you first." But they had no idea what was about to unfold. Earlier today, my mom Brenda and I were in the kitchen, not speaking much. After everything that went down at my graduation, her laughing during my speech, tripping me on stage, and Heather, my former best friend, shouting karma at me, things were awkward. She tried making small talk like nothing had happened, asking if I wanted help finding a real job, while I sat there gripping the edge of the table. She smiled that smug little smile of hers, like she knew she had won. Except, she didn't know that the night before, I had gone through her old files. She didn't know I had spoken to my real dad. She didn't know I had proof of years of fraud. And she definitely didn't know her world was about to come crashing down, harder than she had ever tried to knock me down. Graduation day was supposed to be the one day that belonged to me. It wasn't just about a piece of paper, it was about surviving all the years Brenda told me I was nothing, that I was too stupid, too emotional, too dramatic. It was about proving to myself that I wasn't broken, even if the people who raised me tried everything to make me feel that way. I remember standing behind the thick curtain at the ceremony, the sound of hundreds of folding chairs scraping against the floor as families settled in. My palms were sweaty. I gripped my speech cards tighter. I could see my mom, Brenda, in her leopard print dress, big sunglasses pushed up onto her head like a crown. And right next to her, sharing a bag of sour candy, was Heather Cross. My ex-best friend. It still stung seeing Heather there. After all the betrayal, after the constant backhanded compliments and shady little comments she thought I didn't notice, it hurt more than I liked to admit. When my name was called, I stepped out into the blinding light of the gymnasium. The applause was polite, a few people whistled. I was supposed to give a short speech, nothing groundbreaking, just a few words about overcoming adversity, about gratitude. Irony dripped off every sentence as I read. It was going okay until halfway through. I was talking about how the people who raise us leave permanent marks, shaping us even in ways we don't understand. That's when I heard it. A loud, cruel laugh. It echoed in the silence. I knew that laugh. Everyone did. Brenda. Laughing, shoulders shaking, making no effort to hide it. I stuttered but kept going, cheeks burning, trying to pretend it wasn't happening. And then, like a dagger through the heart, she shouted, "Too bad your real dad isn't here to see this mess." There was an audible gasp. Chairs creaked. Heads turned. I froze, my mouth dry. I couldn't look at anyone. I stared at the exit sign above the door and finished the last lines of my speech without even knowing what I was saying. I wanted to disappear. I walked off the stage, focused on breathing, counting my steps. I didn't even notice Brenda standing near the steps until it was too late. She leaned casually against the rail, and as I passed her, she jutted out her foot just enough. Just enough. I tripped, hard. The kind of fall that you don't recover from with dignity. My gown tangled around my legs, my mortarboard went flying, and I hit the hardwood floor face first with a sickening smack. The room was silent for a second, then filled with whispers and muffled laughter. I pushed myself up, blood trickling from my split lip, eyes stinging with tears I refused to let fall. And then, from the bleachers, loud and clear, "Karma hit you first." Heather. Standing and clapping like she was at some twisted comedy show. I didn't look at her. I didn't look at anyone. I gathered what was left of my dignity and stumbled out the side door into the hot, sticky June air. Outside, the world spun around me. I sat on a low wall near the parking lot, pressing my fingers against my bleeding lip, trying to calm my racing heart. I didn't even go to the dinner Brenda had organized afterward. I didn't want to hear her pretend to be proud of me while slipping in jabs about how I was lucky to have graduated at all. I didn't want to sit across from Heather, pretending we were still friends. Instead, I went home. And that's when everything changed. Brenda must have left in a rush because she forgot to lock the filing cabinet in her office. It was a cheap wooden thing, and honestly, it wouldn't have stopped me anyway. I wasn't even sure what I was looking for. Maybe just something to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy, that the years of feeling unwanted weren't all in my head. I found it tucked away in the back. A folder labeled D. Lansing. Inside, letters. Old photographs. A DNA test. Legal documents showing a custody battle I never knew existed. I sat there, heart pounding in my ears, flipping through page after page. My real father was Derek Lansing. He lived just 40 minutes away in York. He had fought for visitation rights. He had written me letters, dozens of them, all returned unopened. Brenda had blocked every attempt he made to be in my life. Worse, Brenda had continued collecting child support checks for years and never used a dime of it for me. After Paul, the man I thought was my father, died, Brenda forged paperwork to collect survivor benefits, knowing damn well it was illegal. I felt sick. The room spun. Every lie, every insult, every casual cruelty suddenly made horrifying sense. Brenda didn't just hate me, she resented me. I was a living reminder of her choices. A living, breathing secret she had buried. I copied everything. Took pictures with my phone, made copies at the 24-hour FedEx down the street. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew I needed evidence. I called the number listed on one of Derek's old letters, half expecting it to be disconnected. It rang twice. And then a deep voice answered. Hello? I almost hung up. My throat closed up. But I forced the words out, hi. I think I'm your daughter. There was a long pause. Then the man on the other end started to cry. Hearing Derek cry on the other end of the line made something crack inside me. I hadn't even realized how numb I'd gone over the years, how much I had buried just to survive. Sitting there at 2 a.m, knees pulled up to my chest, the sound of a man I didn't know weeping over me was almost too much. We stayed on the phone for over an hour. I barely spoke, mostly listened. Derek told me about the court battles, about hiring lawyers he couldn't afford just to try and see me. He told me how Brenda accused him of awful things to keep him away. How every Christmas, every birthday, he sent cards that were returned unopened, marked moved. No forwarding address. He never stopped trying. Brenda just made sure he never got through. Somewhere between 3 and 4 a.m, Derek asked if he could meet me. He lived with his wife Melanie now, a schoolteacher, in a little brick house on the edge of York. I told him I needed a little time, that things were complicated. Complicated didn't even begin to cover it. The next day, Brenda acted like nothing had happened. She walked around the kitchen humming, flipping through real estate magazines, sipping her overpriced imported coffee. At one point, she asked if I was over my little scene from graduation yet. I stared at her across the breakfast table, the sunlight catching the gold bracelet she bought with money that should have gone toward my textbooks, my rent, my future. I felt detached. Like I was watching a stranger. That afternoon, I sent an email to Derek, attaching everything I had found. He forwarded it immediately to his attorney. By the end of the week, Brenda was served with legal papers at her office: fraud, forgery, obstruction of custody, misuse of federal survivor benefits. The charges were serious. Enough to not just ruin her career, but to put her behind bars. Word spread fast in Harrisburg. Small towns have a way of chewing up and spitting out wrongdoing like nothing else. Brenda's coworkers whispered behind her back. Clients canceled contracts. She still strutted around town like she owned the place, but you could see it, the cracks forming under the surface. Heather wasn't spared either. Derek's private investigator, yeah, he had won, found out Heather had been feeding false tips to my university, accusing me of plagiarism and cheating. She almost got me expelled last fall, and I never even knew it was her. It all made so much sense now. How Heather would show up randomly to study with me right before surprise academic audits. How she'd seem almost too curious about what I was working on. I had always brushed off the bad gut feelings I got around her because she was my best friend. At least, I thought she was. A week after graduation, Heather's scholarship was revoked. Without it, she couldn't afford to stay enrolled. She packed up her dorm in the middle of the night, slinking out of town without saying goodbye. People turned on her fast. Our old classmates who once laughed at her jokes about me weren't laughing anymore. Meanwhile, Brenda's world unraveled one thread at a time. Clients ghosted her. She was asked to take a leave of absence from the real estate firm. Friends who used to kiss up to her suddenly forgot her name. And me? For the first time, I could breathe. I met Derek and Melanie a few days later at a small diner off Route 30. The place smelled like burnt coffee and fried onions, and the booths were cracked and patched with duct tape. But it was perfect. Derek looked like an older, rougher version of me, same stubborn jawline, same thick dark eyebrows. When he hugged me, it felt right. Like a puzzle piece I didn't know was missing suddenly snapping into place. We sat for hours, swapping stories, piecing together the broken timeline of my childhood. He cried when I told him about the times I waited by the window on Christmas Eve, thinking maybe my dad would magically come back. I cried when he showed me a shoebox full of letters he wrote me over the years, all sent back unopened, each one a small goodbye he never wanted to say. Melanie was gentle and kind, sliding a plate of fries toward me like I hadn't eaten in weeks. They didn't push. They just sat with me, let me exist. It was more kindness than Brenda had shown me in 22 years. After that, things moved fast. Derek's lawyer pushed for Brenda's prosecution. Federal fraud is no joke, and even with her best manipulative tactics, Brenda couldn't sweet-talk her way out of it. She tried, of course. One evening, just as the sun was setting and painting the sky in soft pinks and oranges, she knocked on my door. She looked tired. Smaller somehow. No heels, no flashy jewelry. Just Brenda, standing barefoot on my porch like some sad ghost. "Celeste," she said, voice cracking. "We need to talk." I didn't say anything. I just leaned against the doorframe and waited. She launched into a speech, about how hard it was being a single mom, about how much she sacrificed, about how I owed her everything because without her, I wouldn't have survived. I almost laughed. Because standing there, listening to her twist herself into knots trying to make herself the victim, I realized something: I didn't owe her a damn thing. Every success I had, every battle I fought, every scar I carried, they were mine. Not hers. I told her to leave. And when she started to cry, real, ugly sobs, I didn't comfort her. I shut the door. And for the first time in my life, it stayed shut. After I shut the door on Brenda that evening, it felt like the air in the house changed. Lighter. Cleaner, somehow. It was like her lies and manipulations had been seeping into the walls all these years, and now that she was finally out, I could finally breathe. But that didn't mean the fight was over. The legal wheels were in motion. Derek's lawyer, Mr. Hanley, a quiet man in his late 60s with a slight hunch and a permanent frown, moved quickly. Brenda was charged officially with federal benefits fraud, forging legal documents, and obstruction of custody. She had a mountain of evidence stacked against her: my copies, Derek's testimony, court records she thought she had hidden. I still remember the day Brenda was served the official court summons. She tried to keep it quiet, pretending like it was just paperwork mix-ups when neighbors asked why two men in suits showed up at her door. But small towns have long memories and sharp tongues. It didn't take long before whispers turned into full-blown gossip. It was cruel in a way even I hadn't expected. Parents she once bragged to about my failures at the local soccer fields now crossed the street to avoid her. Old friends she used to drink wine with at Sunday brunch blocked her number. Even the little coffee shop down the street, where Brenda used to lord over everyone with her overpriced designer bag, stopped serving her with a polite but firm "we reserve the right to refuse service" notice taped to the window. She was radioactive. Heather wasn't faring any better. Word had gotten around about what she did, the false accusations against me, the way she manipulated teachers and classmates to try and hamper me. A few of her old friends tried to defend her at first, saying she was just young and jealous, but the tide turned fast. When people started digging, they found more. Heather had a habit of backstabbing, stealing boyfriends, lying about scholarships she didn't earn, using other girls' projects and passing them off as her own. The house of cards she built toppled faster than even I expected. She deleted all her social media first, the pictures of her perfect life, the motivational quotes, the fake humility captions under photos of her in expensive dresses. Gone overnight. Then she dropped out of sight entirely. Last I heard, she was living back with her parents on the other side of town, trying to find a job with no degree, no friends, and a wrecked reputation. A part of me wanted to feel bad. But I didn't. Heather wasn't a victim. She knew exactly what she was doing when she laughed at me on that stage, when she called it karma like my pain was something funny. I wasn't angry anymore, though. Just done. Meanwhile, Derek and Melanie became more and more a part of my life. At first, it was awkward, like trying to fit into a family photo you weren't originally part of. We fumbled through dinners, tiptoed around big subjects. But over time, the gaps closed naturally. Derek started showing up for everything, little things Brenda never cared about. My first day at my new job in Lancaster, he showed up at my door with a coffee and a good luck note. When I had to move into my new apartment, he and Melanie helped haul boxes up 3 flights of stairs without a single complaint. He didn't try to replace what was broken. He just showed up. And kept showing up. It was almost disorienting, being cared for without strings attached. No guilt trips. No passive-aggressive comments. No silent treatment for having my own opinions. Just real, steady, unconditional support. In therapy, something Derek gently encouraged and paid for without me asking, I learned how deep the damage went. How Brenda's constant manipulation had left me second-guessing every relationship I had. How growing up in a house full of twisted love and gaslighting had made me crave approval even from people who clearly hated me. My therapist, Dr. Keating, told me once during a session, the torment you suffered wasn't just in the things she did. It was also in the things you never got. That hit harder than anything else. Because it was true. It wasn't just the slaps across the face or the screaming matches. It was the birthdays she forgot. The school plays she skipped. The sick days where I made my own soup and tucked myself back into bed. It was the absence of love dressed up as toughness. And for the first time in my life, I could see it clearly. Meanwhile, the legal case against Brenda gained momentum. Discovery showed years of forged signatures, misused funds, and fake documents. She had crafted an entire world out of lies, and it was crumbling fast. She tried to get a plea deal, of course. Brenda was many things, but stupid wasn't one of them. She knew federal prison wasn't like the slap-on-the-wrist county jail sentences she sneered at on the news. At one point, her lawyer contacted Derek's lawyer to offer an apology letter from Brenda in exchange for leniency. I read the letter once. It was pathetic. Full of excuses. Full of "you have to understand and I was just doing my best and you wouldn't have survived without me." I didn't respond. Neither did Derek. She wanted mercy. But she never once gave it. Not to me. Not to Derek. Not even to herself. The court date loomed closer. It felt like a storm gathering on the horizon, heavy, inevitable. People kept asking me if I was nervous, but I wasn't. I was ready. This time, I wasn't the broken girl sitting in the shadows hoping someone would save me. I was walking into that courtroom standing tall, with the full weight of the truth behind me. The morning of the court date, I woke up before my alarm. The sky outside was pale and cloudless, the kind of morning that feels fresh and final at the same time. I dressed carefully. Simple black dress, low heels. No flashy jewelry. No heavy makeup. Just me, standing as I was. Derek picked me up around 7 a.m. He didn't say much, just squeezed my shoulder as I climbed into his truck. Melanie had packed a small cooler with sandwiches, snacks, and bottled water for us. Like she knew this would be an all-day thing. When we arrived at the courthouse, Brenda was already there. She stood on the courthouse steps in a navy pantsuit that looked expensive but slightly too large, like she had lost weight. Her hair was flat, makeup smeared at the corners of her eyes. She clutched her phone like it was a lifeline but didn't seem to know what to do with it. Our eyes met briefly. For a moment, I saw something flicker across her face, not anger, not even sadness. Fear. It should have made me feel powerful. But it didn't. It just made me feel done. Inside the courtroom, the air was cold and sterile. A few local reporters sat in the back. Brenda's new lawyer, a thin, harried-looking man, shuffled papers anxiously. My hands were steady as I sat between Derek and Melanie. The judge, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes, read through the charges first. Fraud. Forgery. Obstruction of custodial rights. Misuse of federal survivor benefits. Each word landed heavy in the room, like a drumbeat marching toward the inevitable. Brenda's lawyer tried to argue for leniency. Claimed she was a devoted single mother under immense stress. Claimed that the fraud was born of desperation, not malice. When it was Derek's turn to testify, he stood up slowly, took his oath, and walked to the stand. He spoke clearly, simply. About the letters he sent. About the court battles he lost. About the daughter he never got to raise because of Brenda's lies. His voice broke only once, when he described sitting alone on Christmas Eve, year after year, staring at unopened gifts. I didn't cry. I had cried enough for 10 lifetimes already. I just sat there, feeling the weight of every lost year, every stolen moment settle around me like armor. When it was my turn, I didn't shake. I told the court about the years of manipulation, the emotional torment disguised as tough love. The way Brenda humiliated me on the day that was supposed to be the proudest of my life. The hidden files. The secret payments. I finished by reading a letter. Not to Brenda. But to the girl I used to be. The one who waited by the window. The one who made excuses for cruelty. The one who thought love had to hurt to be real. When I sat down, the courtroom was silent. The judge recessed for about 30 minutes to deliberate. We waited in the hallway, the marble floor cold under my heels. Brenda sat a few benches down, staring at the wall, her hands trembling. She didn't look like the Brenda I grew up with, sharp, loud, invincible. She looked small. Fragile. When court resumed, the judge didn't waste time. Brenda was found guilty on all counts. Her sentence? 5 years of probation. 2,000 hours of community service. Mandatory repayment of every penny she stole, over $120,000, plus penalties. And the final blow, a permanent ban from working in any field involving finance, real estate, or legal documentation. Her career was over. Her reputation obliterated. She wasn't going to jail, not today. But she was ruined. Every future job interview. Every loan application. Every whispered conversation in our town. She would carry the stain of what she did forever. And me? I walked out of that courtroom lighter than I had ever felt. There were no cheers, no dramatic confrontations. Just a quiet, satisfied kind of peace settling into my bones. Later that evening, Derek, Melanie, and I sat on their back porch under the string lights, sipping lemonade and eating grilled cheese sandwiches. It wasn't fancy. It wasn't dramatic. It was better. It was real. Derek handed me a small envelope. Inside was a check, not a loan, not a favor, but a gift. It was more than enough to pay off my student loans. Start my life clean. I cried then. Not because I needed the money, but because someone loved me enough to want me free. A few months later, I moved into my own tiny apartment downtown. Got a job editing at a publishing company. Started therapy regularly. Made new friends, the real kind, who don't laugh when you fall. Brenda moved away eventually. Last I heard, she was living 2 towns over, working minimum wage at a department store. She tried, briefly, to start fresh somewhere nobody knew her. But small towns have long memories. And the internet never forgets. Heather tried to rebuild her life, too. Some say she tried going back to school. Others say she moved to Florida with some older guy she barely knew. I didn't really care enough to find out the details. They got their consequences. Not from me. From the truth finally catching up with them. And that was enough. In the end, the best revenge wasn't seeing them suffer. It was seeing myself thrive. Living a life they had tried so hard to convince me I wasn't worthy of. Laughing without fear. Loving without begging. Existing without apology. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't loud. It was just mine. And for the first time in my life, that was more than enough.